Welcome to Adventure Gear Check. Today we want to have a look on two action cameras, point of view cameras. But before we do that, please make sure that you watch this video in HD in 1080, otherwise it wouldn't make much sense to compare the footage. We have on test the Sony HDR30 and the GoPro 3 Black Edition. We took them out a couple times and here's our footage. First thing, we put them on our focus chart. Here you see a photo taken by the GoPro. You see it's not that crisp, it's more smeary, a bit blurry. The lines disappear very fast, especially in the outer sides. And here's the Sony. You see a huge color shift and it's whiter, but it looks very pixely, very crisp and almost too edgy, not natural enough on the straight lines. Both cameras do have a lot in common. They record 170-degree view angle, they record in 1080p, 60 frames. Both manufacturers squeezed 12 million pixels into that little sensor. Unfortunately, the GoPro, as soon as you go from the super wide, the fisheye view, you just reduce down to 8 megapixels. The Sony does a little bit of a different trick. They use digital image stabilization as soon as you go from the 170-degree view angle down to the 120-degree, which makes the image more smoother, especially when you walk and move around. Small sensor cameras are known that they struggle sometimes in low light, simply because there is not enough surface area. Here's some GoPro footage from a caving trip earlier this year. Looks like pretty usable footage. No surprise was the color difference compared with the Sony, which tends to have a color shift into the turquoise green, as you can see in Mariana's jumper on the right here. Also noticeable here in the canyoning walk, it's a lot less tint when the camera is out of the casing. Why I believe the new splash waterproof HDR100 has its benefits. Of course there's a lot noise in the image, but both cameras work okay in low light. Underwater the Sony shows in nuclear blue and nothing is real in focus, just a blurry mess. I think the footage is just not usable at all. The GoPro shots, the sky is less hyper blue and looks more real, but underwater the fish are barely recognizable, everything's blurry again. The attached back screen didn't help much, because I could just see the tiny image when the camera was directly in line with my eye. A slightest tilt and I couldn't see the back screen image due to some reflections. Both cameras couldn't convince me for underwater usage. The image is just blurry and the super wide angle doesn't make any sense to get any close-ups. Here's some very old footage taken with a little pocket camera, waterproof up to 10 meters or 30 feet. A lot clearer, it's not even 1080, but it's watchable and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Design-wise, it's more the personal choice if you prefer the slim design for the side or if you prefer the flat design for the forehead. What I do like is that the GoPro has learned to protect the lens cage a little bit more. The Sony is still outsticking a little bit like a bulb. It's easy to protect on the way. I just put an old sock over the camera so it's kind of protected, but that's really up to you. Both cameras do shoot different formats. Usually I stick to 1080p because that blends with all my other cameras. GoPro goes a bit further and they provide different formats as well. They go up to 1440 and 2.7K and even 4K, but very fast motion. I'm not too sure what to do with it because I have no other footage with it, and even TVs, they just barely make it in 4K. So I'm not too sure what to do with 4K footage or 2.7K. I would just reduce it to 1080 in post-production anyway. With both cameras you can shoot 1080p in 50 or 60 frames per second. Because we're in a PAL area, not in the USA where they shoot NTSC, you better stick to 25p or 50p, unless you really have to. So what does that frame rate actually mean? If you take a photo, you have one frame. If you take that 25 times a second, you have a video. If you do that 50 times a second, you still just have a video. So why do we have the 50 frames per second? It's very easy, you get a very smooth slow motion. You record in 50 frames, then slow it down half the speed, and then you have a very smooth 25 frames per second footage. Both cameras go a bit overboard. They provide 100 and 120 frames per second, so you can actually have 4 times slower than usual if you really need it to tell your story. Both cameras again have almost the same data rate streaming. in 25 to 30 megabits per second. You watch now YouTube or Vimeo, which provide usually 8 megabits per second. It's the same as an old DVD. HD TV goes up to 15 to 20 megabits per second. So both cameras really cover that requirement. For TV, they usually like to see 50 megabits per second for the whole streaming. You can have less for short inserts. Bracket wise, there's so much stuff on the market. We put them on our helmet, of course. We tried all the selfie varieties. There are suction cups. There's plenty out on the internet. You can get your stick for the ultimate selfie video. The only thing that I could not recommend is the Sony bicycle holder. That's just crap. We had to use the rubber grommets provided, but the whole thing was just wobbling and we couldn't get any solid footage. While we are on the bike, I must say the phone apps are a great help to adjust the cameras on the helmet. I was a bit disappointed that I couldn't see anything on the GoPro app after I hit record. The Sony app provided an image even during recording. On sunny days, I would recommend an ND filter for all these cameras to just get the shutter speed down, even if you don't know what it is. On DSLR cameras, you simply screw it on top. You also get them on the aftermarket for both cameras. It's just to get less light into the camera, to have a longer shutter speed and get some motion blur. Too short shutter speed can look a bit unnatural, too much of a strobe effect, especially when you shoot in 25 frames per second. We all know it looks better when it sounds good, and here's what we think. Here we are in the canyon again. The cameras are in a water case and you hear the GoPro. Now listen to the Sony. It's about 6 to 8 decibel louder and a slightly higher pitch, I guess. On a bike, here's a GoPro. It seems to be okay in the same casing. While the Sony has already the wind buffer in the audio. The GoPro seems to be too quiet to get some conversation recorded.
Sorry? Yeah, down, but just lay back.
Unless there is no ambient noise and the person is really close to the camera.
Well, just for the video. Yeah, got it.
Both cameras do have a microphone inlet. For the GoPro, you gotta buy an adapter and use it on the side, while the Sony provides a mini jack at the bottom. I'm not too sure what to do with the microphone of any of these cameras because I can't put them in a cage, so I have to use them handheld. I thought about it a long time and I came up with just one idea why you possibly use this with a microphone jack. You may use a camera on a tripod further away from you. You want a microphone close to the object to get clear, crisp audio. You don't have a transponder. You use a microphone, plug it into the camera, put the microphone on yourself, and then you hit record, clap. That gives you that peak in post-production where you can synchronize the audio to the footage. Or simply said, use it as a voice recorder. Yeah. We're almost at the end of the show, and before I share my final tips with you, here's the street performer head. I'm not asking for money, but if you feel well entertained the last 7 minutes, just throw some likes in here. Share the video on Facebook or join the conversation. We do this just for fun, so if you like it, that keeps us going. And now I gotta make some real money because it's almost Christmas and new action cameras coming out very soon. Create a story, no video. Start with some preparation shots to prime up the audience, get ready for action. Shoot actively, take the camera and record different angles. Change the perspective as much as possible. That gives you good footage and you save on battery too. Allow a couple extra seconds for each shot. Count to 10. You won't regret it during the editing. In cold environments, the cameras like to fog up. If you don't have the inserts for it, simply help yourself with some aluminium wrapping. The metal cools down a lot faster than the plastic, that's why the condensation will happen there and not on the lens. Try to get as much audio as possible. That provides you with endless opportunities to tell your story.
The wall.
You just push further, yeah. We go together.
No.
Make a video out of every activity that you shot. The best way to improve your shooting skills is when you really finish the videos. Then you see what works, what not, and where the gaps are. Here's my personal opinion about these action cameras. I think they're great little cameras, and GoPro revolutionized the video production a couple of years ago. But they're not the silver bullet. There's so many alternatives out there where you can see what you shoot, you can adjust the shutter speeds, you can get good audio, and you miss out on all of it when you get just an action camera. So think about it, if that little bit, the 2 or 3 seconds that I gain out of this footage really is necessary to tell your story. On a GoPro or Sony action camera or any other, you possibly can't tell a story. You can't hear your friends, you don't have the ambient sound.
There's a big spider on your right leg. See that?
To just have a look on YouTube and Vimeo, you just have shaky footage and music underneath, but you can't hear anything. And that's a big downside on these cameras. They are so small, which is kind of good. But do you need this small? Essentially, that's a big question you gotta ask yourself. I think you're maybe better off with a handheld camera or even just your smartphone, where you can shoot pretty good video and take photos and you actually see what you do. That's my personal opinion. I hope you learned a little bit out of this video. Feel free to like, join us on Facebook, and see you next time. Thank you. Thanks. Merci. Muchas gracias.